Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews. 6 new shows for you this week once again. A couple of them, like last week, are foreign imports that streamers have picked up because they're looking for some original content, and obviously with coronavirus going on, they've had very few chances to produce their own new content, so they're sort of picking from other countries. So we have 2 of those. Couple of Netflix shows too. We didn't do any Netflix last week, which might be the first time ever in the almost year that I've been doing this show that we didn't have any shows from Netflix when you have a whole slate of 6 shows, because Netflix always cranks them out. But last week, not so much. This week we've got 2, and then 2 really high-profile new entries as well. HBO's got Lovecraft Country, and Apple TV Plus has the Jason Sudeikis comedy Ted Lasso. So we're going to talk about all of those coming up. First, let's get to the news. The renewals and the cancellations are always up first. We have a bunch of cancellations, but just 2 renewals, so we'll do those first. And there are shows that are very timely for this program because one is being reviewed this week and one was reviewed last week. Ted Lasso has already been picked up for season number 2 on Apple TV Plus. You know, they really like to prove to the audience that they're behind the shows. So most of the launch shows have gotten a second season before the first season even aired. So Ted Lasso, the first season just went up within the last week and a half. And already that has been renewed for season 2. So we'll find out whether I think that's worth it coming up a little bit later. And then also Hitmen for Peacock got renewed. And technically it got renewed over in its original British network, which was, I think, Sky is what they're on. And so that has been picked up over there. So Peacock will also be bringing us season 2 of Hitmen, which I reviewed on last week's show and thought it was very enjoyable, very funny. So that's good news. Cancellations, there's a bunch of them. So let's get to it. First of all, the 2 really interesting ones, I think, come from Comedy Central because these are both shows that previously got renewed, and now they're reversing that decision and canceling them. And they are both like long-term Comedy Central shows. Drunk History, which was approved for a 7th season, now is not getting one. And then Tosh.0, which I think Tosh had like a 3 or 4 year contract that they are now basically making null and void. It was going to be in production for season number 12. And personally, I didn't know Tosh.0 was still even on, but whatever. But he is going to be shopping that to other networks and platforms. So Tosh.0 might not be dead, but Comedy Central at least is kicking that to the curb. They're really focusing over there on the animated stuff. You know, I've reported the last few weeks about them doing the Beavis and Butthead revival, Ren and Stimpy, the Daria spinoff. So they're really moving into that animation space a lot more. And obviously, like, The Daily Show is going to continue and some of their other shows, but yeah, the Tosh and the Drunk History is pretty surprising since they were both long-time shows. And then Netflix has canceled a few as well. Another long-term show, well, I mean for Netflix, I guess long-term, and that's Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. That was, I don't know exactly like if they do seasons of that because it's more of a news-based show, so I'm not sure if you would call it like, oh, it was going into season 4 or whatever, but certainly that was a mainstay for the last few years and an awards grabber as well for Netflix. So it's very interesting that has been canceled. And then a couple one-season shows, The Society and I Am Not Okay With This, and they were cited as being canceled due to COVID-19, you know, sort of ancillary things there because they were really unable to produce more episodes, and I think at some point these networks are really going to just start having to drop the hammer and be like, all right, well, we can only afford X amount of shows now with the COVID-19, so once we start back up again, we're going to focus on A, B, C, and D, and maybe, you know, H and I go away. So The Society, I don't really know anything about. It aired in May of last year before I started doing this show, so I never reviewed it, I never watched it. But I'm Not Okay With This, I really enjoyed. I think that was maybe in the spring I took a look at that, and I thought that was really well done. I was excited for more of that, but it's not to be. Season 1 and done. And then another one seasoner over on Showtime, Penny Dreadful, The City of Angels, which I reviewed very, very mediocrely. I thought it was, I think I gave it like a C, maybe a C+. I liked the old Hollywood kind of theme of it and the setting, but it just was very confusing, and I didn't watch the first Penny Dreadful, so even the, from what I understand, pretty loose connection to that was lost on me anyway. So, no tears shed for that one, but that is another one and done season, and that's over on Showtime. So goodbye to that. So let's move on to Corona TV. I've never really called the segment that, but we talk every week or two about different things that have been affected by Corona. So NBC is going to have a new show come on. Only 2 episodes, though, which I think is a little weird. So it's more kind of like specials, I guess. But it's called Sketchy Times with Lily Singh. And Lily Singh has been doing their Late Late Show, which airs at 1:35 in the morning. It was previously, Bob Costas 25 years ago, whatever. And then it was Carson Daly for a long time, 16, 17 years. And now it's A Little Late with Lily Singh, which, I reviewed moderately favorably. I think I gave it a B- or so when that first came out. But with the caveat that, look, any startup talk show, it's hard if the person is not used to having a talk show. So I sort of give it the benefit of the doubt a little bit because of that. But she'll be playing every single character in this sketch show. And this is harkening back to what she used to do on YouTube before the talk show came up, which kind of, was her bread and butter. It's what got her famous, playing all of the characters in her sketches on there. So NBC's basically just doing sort of an extension of that, but it will all be shot at her home with her and her alone. So it kind of makes sense, to get that on. I'm not sure why they only ordered 2, since NBC's fall schedule is very, very up in the air at this point. But all right. And then Masked Singer. So the Masked Singer is pretty much the only thing on Fox that they still need to produce, because everything else for their fall lineup is either holdovers from the summer or animated shows, which they can just obviously farm out, and people don't have to be in the same room, or stuff that they've gotten from other platforms like LA's Finest that they got from Spectrum. But Masked Singer is the one thing on Fox's fall schedule that's like, okay, we got to do this, and really it makes sense. It's a huge ratings grabber. And so what they're doing now, instead of having the live audience and the panel of judges and then, Nick Cannon and, of course, the Masked Singers, they're going to have, I guess, still the panel of the 4 judges. Well, they're not really called judges, I guess, on Masked Singer, but I don't know what you call them, celebrity panel. And then, of course, Nick will be there. But instead of the live audience, they can't have that right now. They're going to have what they call Masked Singer superfans from their homes doing the voting on each week. And a friend of mine that I talk about the Masked Singer with all the time pointed this out to me a few days ago and was like, dude, you should totally try and get on there. Send them in a video of one of your Masked Singer reviews from last season. So I looked into it. All of the dates so far are already on waiting lists. So I guess I kind of missed my opportunity. But I think I'm still going to try and send something in and be on the waiting list. And you have to pick which day you want to do. I don't really care, so I'm just maybe going to pick one like in the middle, because you figure the first ones are probably going to be really booked up, and then maybe the later ones will be booked up too. So I'm just going to kind of grab one in the middle, and I don't know what all you have to do, and I have to like submit a video of you, and not necessarily talking about the Masked Singer, but just a video so they know that your quality of the camera is all right, because I guess they're going to maybe put some people actually on the show to sort of talk about it. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I certainly am not shy about talking about my guesses for the Masked Singer, so that could be very, very interesting. But yeah, I think I'll maybe put in for that, but that will be one change. And overseas, I think it's the Australian version, had to shut down because a few of the people on the crew got coronavirus. So they're right now sort of paused for the filming in, I do believe it's the Australian version of Masked Singer. Okay, so other than that, let's see. We have a Joe Exotic show coming with Kate McKinnon as Carol Baskin. Makes total sense to me. What's funny is this was actually in the works through NBC before Tiger King. Like, obviously, this story has been around a while. There was a podcast in 2016 that sort of got the ball rolling about people being curious about these people. And so NBC was already in talks with Kate when Tiger King hit on Netflix, and so they were like, all right, now we really got to do this show. But the interesting thing about this is, because they don't often do like, deals and here's what might be coming up on the networks, but this one's interesting because the way things are structured now with the streamers all kind of being owned by somebody else, or not all of them, but a lot of them. And so this is going to be a limited series that is going to air on NBC, but also on Peacock, and also on USA, which is, they're all owned by Universal. And so I imagine it's going to be like they'll air it one night on NBC, and then maybe the next day it'll be available on Peacock, and then maybe that weekend they'll run it on USA or something. And that's not necessarily new. I mean, there's been a lot of programs that have done that, but I feel like in the past it was more for something like a sort of ratings boost, like, oh, well, this show isn't performing that well, let's put the reruns on USA, or let's put the reruns on, Bravo or whatever, and try to goose ratings. This is like, it's set from the start, like no matter how the ratings are, it's going to these other platforms, with the same episodes in a similar amount of time. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting approach to it. I still have not done a paid Peacock membership yet, because you almost don't need to. Like, unless you're really going to dive into full seasons of some of their original shows, the first episode or two of almost everything of there is free, of the original content. And then they have a lot of their full series for free on there too. I believe Parks and Rec is one of them, and 30 Rock, and so I will eventually pay the $4.99 a month. It's like a cheap subscription, but it's just interesting because business-wise, I don't know if it works, because I feel like everybody's sick of paying for things, but it does kind of get their name in the door and part of the conversation, maybe, if you're able to watch the first episode of something for free. I don't know. I mean, I talked about that at length when I did the Peacock Is It Worth It video, but it's just interesting, that's all. And in fact, I one of the shows that I'm reviewing this week is on Peacock, and I watched the first episode for free because that's all that's up for free, but I still got a good sense enough of the show to grade it. So there you go. All right, so finally we're going to do reboots. There's only 2 this week that I have. The 16 and franchise is going to be continuing on MTV. I guess this is maybe more of a spin-off than it is a reboot, but they had 16 and Pregnant and My Super Sweet 16 and all the 16 shows. So MTV is going to start running a show called 16 and Recovering, which is obviously, huge crisis with opiates and alcoholism and all that kind of stuff in teens. And I've certainly known, I mean, back when I was in high school, and this was in the 90s, I knew at least one kid that was in rehab by junior year. Or maybe not rehab, but like AA or whatever. So, it's definitely something that's been a problem for a long time. And over the years, I've certainly known, high schoolers that have been in recovery programs or rehab or whatever. So, I think that's interesting. I didn't watch the 16 and Pregnant stuff, but I always got the sense that it wasn't necessarily they were glorifying these people. Like, you should get knocked up at 16. Like, I feel like they were showing how hard it was to be 16 and pregnant. And here, I imagine it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be like, this is, drugs are horrible, and this is, the road to recovery is not an easy one, and all that kind of stuff. So, I think it's good. I mean, look, I haven't watched MTV in like 10 years, but I think teenagers that may have issues could get something out of that, so I'm all for that. And then Powerpuff Girls are headed for a live-action version on the CW, and it's going to be produced by Greg Berlanti, who he's like the head dude at the CW. Like, he does all of the Arrowverse shows, and I believe he does all the Archie-related shows as well, like Riverdale and Katie Keene, and all of that. I think he is just the dude over there at the CW, so anything he wants to do, he gets done. The animated version, I believe, is still on Hulu. I know it surfaced on Hulu a few years ago, but you can check that out if you want to catch up on the old animated version. I never really got into Powerpuff Girls. I obviously know what it is, but I was already in college by the time it came out, and I did not have a ton of TV time. I was working 2 jobs. I was in college full time. So I kind of was picking and choosing my shows a little more wisely in the late 90s than I do now. Now I watch like everything, or at least try to. But, back then it was like Ally McBeal, and I was still on the X-Files at that point, and Friends, of course, and Frasier and all that. So I didn't watch Powerpuff Girls, but obviously know what it is, and I think a live action version would be cool. From what I understand, it's going to be putting the gals into their 20s, so they're not really going to be girls anymore. They're going to be hot CW 20-year-old girls, and I guess still fighting crime and stuff. So that should premiere, who knows with Corona, but probably for the 2021 fall season. So probably in about a year we might get that one on the CW. Alright, so that is what I've got for the news. Let's get to the review portion of the program. We're going to start with, I think, certainly the most talked about show of the week, Lovecraft Country. And good news for you that don't have HBO, you can get the first episode for free on YouTube. I will put a link to it in the description. That's how I watched it. It's ratings-wise, it did just about as well as the first episode of Watchmen. Critically, it's being received about as well as the Watchmen. It has, I think, right now a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. And obviously, Watchmen was the big HBO race relations show of last year. It has all of the Emmy nominations, so maybe Lovecraft Country will sort of follow in those footsteps, as Watchmen turned out to be a limited series and not a regular series. But this takes place in the 1950s, and it's about a young black dude who is going to search for his missing father. Let me get the names of the actors here. So the lead character is Jonathan Majors. He plays Atticus. They mostly call him Tick in the show, but and he's searching for his father along with his girlfriend in tow, played by Jurnee Smollett, who I loved from the last couple seasons of Friday Night Lights. So, I'm well versed in her dramatic career. And also they have his uncle in tow, played by Courtney B. Vance, who I also love. Recently we saw him in the OJ limited series, I guess, was it The People versus OJ Simpson. But, I've known him since back, he played Jim in the Huckleberry Finn movie in the 90s with, that was Elijah Wood, right, I think? So, I've known of him for a long, long time. But anyway, so they're going from town to town looking for his missing father, and at the same time, they are figuring out some very dark secrets about this town that reportedly is the basis for a lot of the H.P. Lovecraft stories, but turns out to be maybe those stories weren't fiction after all, and these creatures really do exist and that kind of thing. But all the while, they're also fighting massive systemic racism because it is the South in the 50s, so they're certainly not shying away from those topics. Look, Lovecraft has been one of these very interesting, let's say, characters in the last decade or so, because I didn't really know much about him other than he is like one of the classic sci-fi writers, horror writers of all time. But I didn't really know the racist roots of him as a person, just because I've never really looked into it. I don't know if I've even read any of his stories, really. But I know, I have a lot of friends who dig sci-fi stuff and horror stuff that are big fanatics of the Lovecraft work. But as a person, problematic is about the nicest thing you could say about him. He was a straight-up total racist, total Hitler fan, like all of the things that are not great and downright awful. And then especially like in 2019, 2020, like when things are really, really coming to light about certain people from the past, it's a hard line to sort of toe. So there's been this question over the last decade within the horror community of, how can we enjoy this guy's work when he was clearly just a monster of a person? And so this is actually based on a book that was written in, I want to say 2016 maybe, Also called Lovecraft Country. And basically, the author of that, Matt Ruff. Misha Green is the producer of this show. But he was the one, Matt Ruff, who wrote the book Lovecraft Country, and essentially he was trying to rectify it with making these strong black characters the focal point of the narrative. And so I think that is certainly one way to go about it. You could still have some of these interesting Lovecraft creatures and story threads, but have this black family and these black characters be at the center of it, and have them be just almost superhero like in their ability to kick ass and their intelligence and all of that stuff. So I think that certainly is one way you could go about it, and I think it works in just an amazing sense here. First of all, the acting is great. I'm not super familiar with Jonathan Majors. Let me see what I might know him from. Okay, so he was in a movie called The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which I've heard of, but I did not see. All right, so he's done parts in movies that I've seen. He was in White Boy Rick, Captive State. I hated Captive State. That was a stupid movie. White Boy Rick was actually really good, though. Matthew McConaughey was in that. When We Rise. Okay, so he was in 4 episodes of that, too. So, I've seen him here and there. But Jurnee Smollett is amazing. Like I said, she was great on Friday Night Lights. The two of them have great chemistry. And also they have good chemistry with Courtney B. Vance. And this is a really interesting hybrid of a show, unlike anything that maybe I've ever seen. I mean, I think it takes the ball. Now, listen, I have to still watch all of Watchmen. I've only watched the first episode, I know. So but I've only also seen the first episode of this. So I'm only comparing really premiere episodes to premiere episodes. But Watchmen, I think, has a specific bent to it because it's a more superhero show than anything, right? This is an amalgamation of so many different things. It's certainly dramatic, but obviously, and we don't really see a lot of the sci-fi stuff until the last maybe 15 minutes, and it's a little over an hour. The pilot is 65 minutes, so it is a bit long, but I'd say until 45, 48 minutes in, we don't get really any sense of the sci-fi. It's all drama, but it's one of these, it's a metaphor, okay, which is really the worst demons? The actual sci-fi demons, or these racist, cops and townspeople that are trying to drive them out of town and attack them, and at one point there's, some comments about lynching, who are the bigger demons? Who are the bigger enemies here? It's just, 2020 is a perfect time for this show, and I've said this about a few shows at this point. Obviously these things were in the works long before the Black Lives Matter stuff. Well, of course, Black Lives Matter, I guess, has been around a few years, but I mean, the George Floyd stuff, the protests, all of that, because you can't record anything new right now because of COVID. So obviously all this stuff was filmed, a year ago, 9 months ago, whatever. It's just perfect timing that it's happening right now. The acting is great in this. It's like nothing I've seen. I mean, it is so wholly original. I'm very excited to see what they do with it. I thought The Watchmen was great, but I admit I had to sort of do some research into what the first episode even meant and what some of the symbolism was and da-da-da-da-da. And maybe that makes it more brilliant because it's a little more hidden. I don't know. This, I think, might wear its intentions on its sleeve a little bit more than Watchmen. Sort of I don't know, it reminds me a bit of Get Out from Jordan Peele. It's got layers to it, but they're a little bit less hidden, I think, than in certain things like Watchmen, where you really do have to maybe dig a little deeper. I'm not sure what makes a better show. I gave Watchmen an A-, so obviously I didn't dislike it at all. And I am excited to see the rest of it. I love Regina King. But for me, this is easily one of the best pilots I've seen all year. I'm very excited to see what comes next. There's not much more I can say. I will say this, too. For an HBO show, I really appreciated that they don't go overboard with all the HBO-isms. You know, there's a few F-bombs, but it's sparse. They are not littered through the show. I don't think there's any nudity in it. I don't think. And yes, there's certainly violence towards the end when the aliens are coming at them. Or, well, I don't know if they're aliens, whatever they are. We don't really know yet. But, you know, I really appreciate that HBO didn't go full hog on, like, making this, you know, pushing the envelope there. Because you know what? You don't need it. The themes of this push the envelope so far as it is. You don't need to throw in extra things to make it saucy, you know. So, for me, this is one of the best shows that I've seen so far in 2020. Certainly, in this TV season. I guess we're still in the 2020-2021, or we're still in the 2019-2020 TV season until September hits, I suppose. But Lovecraft Country gets an A from me. I think this is a brilliant show. Very excited to see what comes next. All right, so I've spent a lot of time on that. I try to keep these under 45 minutes, so let's keep it moving here. Ted Lasso is up next. This is a comedy with Jason Sudeikis starring as the title character on Apple TV Plus. Like I said earlier, it has already been renewed for a season 2. So it's doing the whole Apple TV Plus bit where they've put up 3 episodes from the start. Then they're going to put up an episode every week, and I believe there are 10 that are going to be up total. So this should go into October, I guess, or maybe the very end of September. But right now there's 3 up that you can watch, or wait, maybe the 4th one. Yeah, the 4th one premiered on Friday, so it's going up every Friday, so you can see the first 4 up already. And so this essentially, look, I don't watch sports, so I didn't really know that this came from an ad campaign that they were running, like, at NFL games and stuff, this character. So, unlike things like the Cavemen TV show, like, I didn't know this stemmed from anything until after I watched it. So I'm not sure how it would have, you know, colored things, but it was, you know, a big sports thing, I guess, at the beginning of the year. But he is, Ted Lasso is an American football coach who, you know, basically ends his job with the NFL or whatever team he was doing, and has taken on to coaching the English version of football, which of course is soccer, and he knows nothing about it. So he's at this team called AFC Richmond, and he just doesn't know anything about soccer, but he brings his sort of folksy, you know, whimsy to the team, to the owners of the team. Hannah Waddingham plays the new owner of AFC Richmond. She's going through this bitter divorce, and one of the things she got in the divorce was this team. And she wants to basically ruin the team because it was the only thing that her now ex-husband really liked. So she's as a big screw you to him, which is why she hired on Ted Lasso, somebody with no soccer experience or knowledge. And we have a few other really, you know, good people here. Brendan Hunt plays Coach Beard, Lasso's assistant and best friend, and then also Juno Temple, who I didn't realize was British. Everything I think I've ever seen Juno Temple in, she was American, but she has this great British accent, so I looked it up and I'm like, oh, okay, well that's why she's British. But she is a model and the girlfriend of, you know, the star player on the team, Jamie, who's played by Phil Dunster. Look, here's the deal with this show. I love this one too. Like, this is a really good week for new shows. Very different, obviously, from Lovecraft Country in many ways. But, you know, first of all, I usually think of Jason Sudeikis as fairly one note. Now, I do like that note. I think he was very funny on SNL. His range maybe wasn't super grand on there. But, you know, in his movies like Horrible Bosses, I think he's on Hall Pass, right? Isn't that him and Owen Wilson? So, you know, he's done a few of these movies, these R-rated comedies where it's like he's always basically the same. It's somebody that I enjoy, but he doesn't branch out that much, right? So this Ted Lasso is not something we've seen before at all from Jason Sudeikis. He's not vulgar at all. He's very homespun. He is whimsical. He is Southern charm. And he is not letting anything deter him from that. He's getting static from the team. He's getting static from the press. He's getting static from Hannah, his new boss. And it just all washes over him. And not due to, ignorance is bliss. He's not stupid. He is just a Southern charm type of person. And I gotta say, it's infectious. This is the exact show that we need right now, There's so many cynical shows on TV, and I think about all the ones I watch, and I think ABC probably does the best at having not cynical shows, like the Goldbergs, or Fresh Off the Boat, or Speechless, things where it's like, let's root for the underdog, let's have a sort of teary-eye moment maybe, and look, that's not to say that I don't like shows that sort of go the other way with it. Like, I love Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I love I think Superstore is funny, but also shows us kind of a negative side sometimes of society, or whatever, and a lot of shows like that, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. You've got funny characters, but half of them are morons. Whatever. This is just a great feeling show, and I think it's something we need. And not only that, I think it's funny. It's funny as hell. I laughed real hard at the 2 episodes I saw. And not just at Ted Lasso and Sudeikis, at a lot of people. Like, I think Hannah, the boss, is her real name Hannah, or the character's name is Hannah? I keep referring to her as Hannah, but I think it's actually maybe her real name is Hannah. Let me pull that back up. Rebecca Welton is the character. I'm sorry. Hannah Waddingham is the actress. But anyway, Rebecca, she's got this hard shell, but you can tell she's got a little bit of a soft spot too, I just think it's wonderful. It's funny, and I'm glad I didn't know this was a commercial. I think I might have gone into it. I try to go into things with an open mind, but I feel like I might have gone into this one with maybe a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, or like, they're trying to make a commercial into a sitcom. Like, what is going on here? So I'm very glad I didn't know that going in, so I could just sort of embrace it for what it is. I don't know. I think it's very good. And again, much like Lovecraft Country, even though they're on Apple TV Plus, there's a couple of F-bombs here or there, but for the most part, they really did not, over sexualize it, over language it. It just, maybe it's a family show, maybe it's not, depending on your family, I suppose. A couple of F-bombs I don't think would have bothered my family, but too much, violence does, or would have as I was growing up. But I really thought this was a good show, one of the best comedies I've seen this year, and surprisingly so. Like Lovecraft Country, I went into it knowing, like, okay, it's got amazing reviews, like, people are talking about it all over, it must be good, and then it was. And this, I didn't have much knowledge going into it at all. I sort of knew the very, very basic premise, but I actually thought it was a movie a couple of weeks ago, till I saw that it was 10 episodes, and I was like, okay, I guess it's a show. So there you go. But I really enjoyed Ted Lasso. I give it an A-. New episodes are available on Fridays. Okay, so now I really am going to try and speed through some of these. We go over to Netflix next for the next 2. Teenage Bounty Hunters is up first. And this is 2 high school students who happen to be twin girls, Sterling and Blair Wesley, fall into a bounty hunting sort of scheme. They hit this guy on the road. They bang up their daddy's truck that they took without permission. This guy turns out to be somebody with a bounty on their head. And so following the crash a moment later is the actual bounty hunter, played by Kadeem Hardison of A Different World fame from 30 years ago, who I haven't seen in a while, but it's great to see him. And he's like, oh, you guys think you have this bounty? No, he's my bounty. And they're like, oh, okay, you think we're bounty hunters? Like, sure, let's play along. And so by the end of the episode, the pilot anyway, they're going to be working for him. Although as a front to their parents, they're going to be working for his ice cream shop. That's sort of his front for the bounty hunting job. This show is a lot of fun, you know. One thing I really liked about it is that they do this sort of twin speak thing. You know how twins kind of have like the twin speak and they have telepathy. So we sort of see that front and center in this. In several scenes, they sort of turn to each other, and the whole background is sort of like, you know, a little bit wavy, a little bit glassy. So you know that like none of the other characters are seeing this or hearing this, but they just turn to each other and have a complete conversation. And you assume they're sort of, in reality, just looking at each other and doing telepathy. But I thought that was a nice touch. I thought it was fun. Great to see Kadeem Hardison, like I said. And what's really great here is that these are both very strong female characters. Like, they're spoiled. They're, you know, rich white girls, but they're not dumb. And I liked that, too. It's Maddie Phillips and Angelica Fellini play the twins here, and one's sort of a little more straight-laced, one's a little more rebellious. They have this sort of Christian outer shell, you know, but really they're, you know, having sex and cheating on the boyfriends and this, that, and the other thing. And we sort of get a sense of that in the first couple of scenes before we even get to the bounty hunting part. But it's a fun show. The soundtrack is cool, and they touch on some hot button topics. Like one of the bounties that they have is their friend's father, who apparently like went with a prostitute and then beat her up, and so they've been looking for him. And he's at this like whites only club, so they kind of tell Kadeem Hardison's character like, well, look, you know, you could try to get this bounty yourself, but you ain't gonna get in the club without us, you know. And so there's like a whimsy to it. I'm not sure how I would classify this. I guess I would say it's a comedy. But it is a 45, 48-minute show, so, you know, a lot of times those are dramas, but I would put it more in the comedy vein. And it's not created by her, but it's produced by Genji Kohan, who does Weeds and Orange is the New Black, so she's definitely got that whole dark comedy thing down, and I think we see that on full display here. With this show too. So overall, I thought this was a good start. It's got 10 episodes up right now on Netflix, and it's currently in the top 10. So I would say this might get a renewal if Netflix is looking at what people are watching and talking about. I think this might be, you know, on the higher end of that radar. And some of the episodes are longer in true Netflix fashion. It's like kind of whatever fits the bill. A couple episodes are almost an hour, and then there's short episodes that are only 42, 44 minutes. So, but I thought it was good. I'm going to leave Teenage Bounty Hunters with a B+. Up next, we have a docuseries on Netflix called High Score. I don't often do the docuseries. I kind of pick and choose the ones I do. Either ones that are being talked about a lot or ones that have some sort of interest to me personally. This one is kind of both. I mean, it's been in the top 10 on Netflix for a while. Well, a while. I guess it just premiered about a week ago. But it's being talked about. I've seen several of my friends on Facebook posting about it. And it is a 6-episode miniseries that basically delves into the history of video games. And each episode sort of takes a different topic, or not really different topic, but different time period, going from the very first episode, which covers things like the Space Invaders craze, the ups and downs of the Atari system, the E.T. game that's, you know, infamously horrible, and things like that. And then as we get into it, you know, episode 2 starts covering the introduction of Nintendo, all the way up to episode 6, which is going to be in the 90s, where they're talking about, you know, better graphics and stuff like that. So I only watched the first episode, you know, like I usually do. I only watch, you know, the pilot in many cases, or the first episode, for an hour-long show, just because I don't have all the time in the world. But I think this is one I'll definitely watch all 6 of eventually, because I'm not a gamer now, but back in the 80s, like, we had Atari, Nintendo Entertainment System, we had a Vectrex, which nobody knows about now, but we had one of those. We had a TI-99, which nobody knows about now. So we had a bunch of different gaming systems, and then in the 90s we got Sega Genesis, and my brother got an N64 and all that. So, I don't game now. I don't have a PlayStation or anything of that nature. My most recent video game system is a Wii. But back in the 80s, man, this was like, I loved video games. And, this is when the games that I was drawn to were not violent, which is why I think I don't play a lot of the newer games. Like, I don't like all the violence. I never played Double Dragon. I never played, Contra I played, the up, down, BA, start, whatever. I did like that because it was easy to beat since you had the code. But a lot of that stuff I didn't get into. I was definitely more Atari, like Pitfall, Pac-Man, like those were my games. So I think this is a very, very interesting show. And what's interesting about it, more than anything, is you could cover all 6 episodes with just the topics they covered in this one. Like, you could make a whole miniseries about the Atari or about early 80s gaming. So they tackle like 5 or 6 different topics in this episode. And because of that, it's sort of a mishmash. They're really kind of all over the place, which I don't love. But the people they interview are very interesting. One is the gal that won. She was a man at the time in transition, but she's a gal now. And so they interview her about her experience being the first ever, National Space Invaders champion. And they show clips from her, actually winning it and being interviewed at the time, as a dude. And, now we see her talking about how it's affected her entire life and her history with the game and all that. So that was interesting. Talking to the creator of the E.T. game and his pitch meeting with Steven Spielberg about the game and how he was on a super time crunch and that's why the game sucked. So all that kind of stuff. We talked to the creator of Pac-Man about how he thought of it and how it became such a big thing. We talked to these guys at, I forget the college, but one of the Ivy Leagues, I think. It was either MIT or Harvard or one of those. How when the arcade craze hit, they started developing mods for the systems and ended up getting sued by Atari. Like, there's all these really interesting stories that I was so fascinated with, I just wanted more. And they sort of jumped from topic to topic because it's only, 45 minutes or whatever. So this is something that I think, especially for gamers, and it's proven with all the comments, that I've been seeing on Facebook about, like, oh, you guys got to check out High Score, and oh, this show's great, and all this. I think that they could have delved in even more and just done different, like, seasons of this and made this, like, 80s or early 80s, then made the second one, the Nintendo boom, for the second season, the third season, the 90s and Sega and 3D graphics and all that kind of stuff. Because I think there are so many avenues to explore. I learned a lot that I had no idea about just from the stuff that they showed in this first episode. So I think it's not quite as extensive as I would like, and if they're going to do this, it could have been maybe 10 episode series instead of 6. But it is, for what it is very fascinating. I just wish it wasn't quite all over the place. So I leave High Score with a B+. So far, mostly really good shows. So let's see what the next 2 bring. We've got these 2 imports from other countries to streamers. And this one is going to Peacock. Peacock's got a lot of overseas stuff. They started with Intelligence, which is that David Schwimmer show that originated in England. And here we have an Australian series. It's listed as a comedy drama. I think it's a little more drama than comedy, for sure. But it is an 8-part miniseries. It's called 5 Bedrooms. And it premiered on Peacock last week. And you can see all the episodes if you're a paying member. Like I said earlier, I'm not, so I just watched the pilot episode of this. And it stars people that I'm not real familiar with, but one of the main stars of it, Kat Stewart, is a big, big actress in Australia. She's been in a ton of shows. Offspring is, I guess, her big show on Network 10. But, she's won some Australian television awards and stuff, so she's sort of like the name person, I guess, on this show. And I guess the other people have maybe done some stuff here or there. But essentially, there's 5 people who meet at a wedding at the singles table, and they're all sort of at different points of their lives. One is in a failing marriage, and one is older in life, and all of that kind of stuff. And they decide after too many drinks to buy a 5-bedroom house together. They think maybe this is the solution to their problems. And obviously, as in TV, we know there are going to be more problems with the house. And it's not like a money pit house. It's not that sort of thing. But just buying the house obviously isn't going to solve problems. There's already in this first episode a lot of relationship issues that are coming up, and fighting with the different people about how the house should be, and this and that and the other thing. But I kind of liked this. I mean, it reminds me a lot of, in tone anyway, it reminds me a lot of some of these shows that NBC has been trotting out to try and be Parenthood or This Is Us. Like This Is Us and Parenthood are like cream of the crop, but then they paddle these other shows out to us that are trying to have a similar type of vibe. Like Council of Dads this season. Last season was The Village. Every year they try to come up with like one sort of feel-good show. I think this is kind of what this is on Australian television. It's it's a little bit funny, but mostly it is a heartfelt drama about these characters. It's a little bit soapy, but not so soapy that it's ridiculous. It's not like in the vein of Melrose Place or Desperate Housewives. It's not like that. It's trying to tug on some heartstrings while we're getting to know these characters a bit. And I think the acting's pretty good too. For not knowing any of these people, I could see why. The lead actress is a big star over there in Australia because she's very good at this. But, I mean, I don't know how interested I am to watch the whole season. Maybe I'll pick it up, maybe I won't. But I do think that the comedy attempts, I don't think, really land ever. So that's why I guess I would call it more of a drama, because even when they're trying to be funny, they're not. But even still, like, the comedy is slice of life comedy. Like, they're not doing routines. They're not doing set up joke kind of thing. But I think the show is actually rather enjoyable. So I'm going to leave 5 bedrooms with a B. As you can tell, I'm trying to still keep this at 45, 50 minutes here. So let's end it now with The Goes Wrong Show. This is a British comedy broadcast on BBC One and filmed live at the Mischief Theatre. And I don't know if it was broadcast live, or if they just filmed it at the theater and then put it on BBC One. But either way, it is now available on Amazon Prime Video. And this stems from a play called The Show That Goes Wrong. And I know a little bit about this because the morning show I listened to out of Philly, Preston and Steve, Preston went to see this with his family. And it's basically, so he talked all about it, the one show. So I know about it. Basically, the premise is, it's a farce. It's a play that they have a quote-unquote script for, but everything that can go wrong will go wrong. People missing their cues, things getting lit on fire by accident, one of the cast members gets drunk, the music, doesn't come in when it's supposed to, that kind of thing. So it becomes a farce. And so when I saw that this is like a televised, I guess sitcom version, you could say, but it is still filmed before a live audience, so maybe I wouldn't call it a sitcom, but an episodic version anyway of it. I was definitely intrigued, and there's 6 episodes total. They're all up right now, and each one is based around a different sort of version of the show. And so the first episode up is the Christmas episode, and it's the same cast throughout. It's not like an anthology where there's different casts, but it's just they're tackling a different half-hour play or musical for each episode. So a lot of things go wrong. Most of the things I already said do happen in this first episode. Props are not what they're supposed to be. Costumes come unraveled. Like, all sorts of things. Anything that can go wrong will, right? And it's, it's funny-ish, but it sort of wears out its welcome. Like, to me, it's kind of like, remember when the Drew Carey show, towards the last, few seasons, every season would have one show where it was like the April Fool's show where there was a bunch of, mishaps, and you could write into them or whatever, or call the number and tell them how many mishaps you saw or whatever. It's kind of like that. Like, I would just prefer to watch a regular episode of the Drew Carey show. So what I do like about this is they have to obviously write a half-hour play first, and then they have to figure out, I think they work backwards probably from there and figure out, okay, well, how can we screw this up for the viewing audience? Like, what can go wrong in this? So first they have to have an actual, like, cohesive script that someone might want to see. So I do think it's an interesting concept, but I definitely think it wears out its welcome. And I think it loses something in the translation from seeing it live at the theater than at home. Like Hamilton, when they did that on Disney Plus, I was like, well, this is great. Like, I feel like I'm right there, I'm right in it. I can see all the angles that I wouldn't get to see, you know, from one specific seat. But here, I don't know. I feel like the live experience is definitely what enhances it, because I think here it's shot in such a way that they definitely want you to see exactly everything that goes wrong as it's going wrong. Whereas I think in the audience, you'd be like kind of looking around for things, and like maybe you'd hear something and be like, oh, did that come from over there? Like, what was that? What happened? Whereas when you're watching it as a show, the camera's already on that spot when whatever it is happens. So I definitely think it loses something in the mix there. And I also don't know how they're going to get 6 episodes out of it. It seems like there's only so many things you can do to go wrong. You know, I mean, I'm probably incorrect in that, but I did theater. Like, I feel like they covered so many things in just that first half hour. I'm not sure what else they can do to differentiate it in subsequent episodes. So, I think it's interesting in concept. The execution for a TV show, I don't think is there. So I leave The Goes Wrong Show with a C+. But, you know, overall, C+ is still a little above average. So realistically, this was an entirely good episode of TV News and Reviews. All 6 shows were positives for me, even if slightly. But some real good ones. Lovecraft Country and Ted Lasso are 2 of, I think, the best shows I've seen in 2020 so far. So definitely check both of those out. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe below if you haven't yet. I'm almost up to 500 subscribers, which is very exciting. So go ahead and hit subscribe on that. I do have other videos to put up. I did a video with Tim, but I'm not sure. It was a Disney video, but I'm not sure if it's able to... It's weird. It's still on my camera, but for some reason my camera doesn't want to upload it to my computer. So I'm looking into that. We may have to re-record it, sadly. But other than that, you can expect more Dan Does Disney from Tim coming up. I have a Food Fanatics with Oreo cookies coming up with Joe. So a lot of stuff coming up. And next week, of course, I'll have more TV news and reviews for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.